This building kept food cold all summer in the 1800s with no electricity. And what's surprising is how simple it is. And they did it with no insulation, just air, wood, ice, and a whole lot of sawdust. And I'm going to show you how that is in this video. They had these really cool air, I don't even know what it's called, but that's where they let ventilation in. They have those on every side. They had very tight walls. They're not tight anymore after, I believe this was built in the 1850s. So that would be after standing out in the weather for 170 years, that it's not as tight as it used to be. They have a big air gap up at the top in the ceiling. Anyway, the building is not currently used for ice storage. It is used as a storage shed, but it's still really cool architecture, and these boards definitely have they've shrank over the years as they've dried out more and more. And it has a dirt floor now, but I believe it had a wood floor. Here we got a little bit of evidence. That board looks like it was part of the wood floor back when it was originally built. And I'm going to show you some ice and the ice pick. So they would have stored the ice 3 inches apart with sawdust all around top, bottom, and on the sides. And they used this ice tongs to pick it up. We'll read later in the video from the story of Farmer Boy, where they used the ice tongs, they used saws to cut it out of the pond, and I think they had 14-inch in each direction cubical ice blocks. These are only like 8 inches, so not a very good representation, but what I could do, try to make the video. And so they built this. The door actually is more surprising to me, because the door is just one layer. The rest of this was a double layer. The other thing that I always thought is you'd have it in a shady place on the north side of the house. This is on the south side of the house, in full view of the sunlight, and it has sunlight almost all day. And apparently that is because the sunlight dries out and the moisture is more of a problem than shade to an ice house with proper amount of sawdust in it. Anyway, I do want to read the Laura Ingalls Wilder book. Farmer Boy has a chapter on how they filled the ice house, and later in the book they make ice cream in August with the ice from the ice house. Hey, I found some sawdust, so here's what it would actually look like. About 3 inches apart, and sawdust all around them, and then you get sawdust 3 inches over top of them. Then the next layer of ice blocks. The earliest record we have for what the roof might have been on the ice house originally is something like this. It has a newer roof now, but this is a similar outbuilding only a few hundred feet away. And so I think it might be the same type of roof. That's what it was 20 years ago. I'm going to show you some really interesting parts of Farmer Boy by Laura Ingalls Wilder. The pictures are by Garth Williams. He's a great illustrator. And there's a chapter called Filling the Icehouse, which, let's go to that. So there's the same type of tongs we have, and ice block. Filling the icehouse. The weather was so cold that the snow was like sand underfoot. And they're talking about how cold it was. Perfect weather for making ice. Not going to read every sentence. They got in the big bobsled and they set out to the pond on Trout River. And there were people. They had French Joe and Lazy John help them cut the ice. And I'm not gonna. They used crosscut saws to cut it. And in this book it explains how they cut each part. So they did, the ice was 20 inches thick, so they did 20 inches square blocks of ice. That's even more than I thought when I was telling you in the story, or in the woodshed, when we were out there. But the real fun part about this is how they explained the loading of the. This is how they got the water, or the ice off the pond, and loaded it on the wagon. And then they're talking about how they, with a shovel, Father spread the sawdust 3 inches thick on the floor. On this he laid the cubes of ice 3 inches apart. Then he drove back to the pond, and Almanzo went to work with Royal in the ice house. They filled every crack between the cubes with sawdust and tamped it down tightly with sticks. Then they shoveled the whole mound of sawdust on top of the ice in a corner, and where it had been, they covered the floor with cubes of ice and packed them in sawdust. Then they covered it all with sawdust 3 inches thick. They worked as fast as they could, but before they finished, Father came with another load of ice. He laid down another layer of ice cubes 3 inches apart and drove away, leaving them to fill every crevice tightly with sawdust, and spread sawdust over the top and shovel the rest of the mound of sawdust up again. They worked so hard that the exercise kept them warm, but long before noon, Almanzo was hungrier than wolves. Okay, so that's basically how they did it. They just did 3 inches thick of sawdust around every block all the way up, and they filled the ice house all the way full. Just at dusk on the third day, Father helped them spread the last layer of sawdust over the topmost cubes of ice and the peak of the ice house roof. And that job was done. Buried in sawdust, the blocks of ice would not melt in the hottest summer weather. One at a time they would be dug out, and Mother would make ice cream and lemonade and cold eggnog all summer long. Okay. And later in the story, they do talk about making ice cream. They had a couple days where, or maybe a week or two, where the children were home without Mom and Dad. And they just made ice cream almost every day. They made taffy. They used up a whole barrel of sugar. And that's kind of the story on so they were making ice cream a lot. So they had ice all summer long, because I think this was in August. Anyway, that's what I wanted to read out of this book. And it's very interesting. It has a lot more about old-fashioned ways in homesteading and how to milk a cow and things like that. How to build your own bobsled out of trees. So definitely consider Farmer Boy if you want to learn how to live off the land.